Copenhagen is one of the most expensive cities in the world. But here's how you can save a bit of money and visit Copenhagen on a budget. You will most likely arrive in Copenhagen Airport, and the best and cheapest way to get from the airport to your hotel will of course depend on where exactly you're staying, but most of the time the best option will be to take the metro. You can use the site journeyplanner.dk to figure out the exact route and the stop where you need to get off. But from the airport, there's only one metro that you can get on, so you can't really go wrong. You can buy a ticket at the ticket machines that you'll find just on the way to the metro and the trains inside the airport. If you're following the signs, you really can't miss them, and there's usually always an employee to help you if you have trouble getting the right ticket. If you're going to around the city center, the price for a ticket will be around $4. Alternatively, you can download the app called DOT Tickets and purchase the tickets through the app. Accommodation is going to be the most expensive part of your stay in Copenhagen, so saving a bit of money here will go a long way in your budget. Airbnbs are usually as or even more expensive than hotels in Copenhagen, so they're probably not ideal for a budget trip unless you're going several people or unless you are renting a single room in someone's apartment. Then perhaps it could be worth it. So just to give you an idea, the price for like a standard hotel room in Copenhagen is going to be around $100 per night. And if you want like a nice hotel, it's going to be more around $200 per night. The only real way to go a lot cheaper than that would be to stay in a hostel, which you could do for around $20 to $30 per night. Doing something like couch surfing or house sitting would of course be the best way to do a real budget trip, but it's also not for everyone. By finding a good deal on a hotel or compromising and staying in a hostel, you could save quite a bit of money, but either way, be prepared to allocate a large chunk of your travel budget to the hotel in Copenhagen. But where to stay? Because of course location also matters in terms of what the price of your hotel is going to be. As a rule of thumb, the further away you go from the center of the city, it's going to get a little bit cheaper. But honestly, it won't get that much cheaper. In my opinion, you're better off staying pretty central so that you can walk or take the bike to most places, thus saving you quite a bit of money on taking the train every single day. So here are some of the areas that I would recommend you to stay in. You can of course stay in central Copenhagen. This is if you want to be right in the action, near to all the touristy things. And if you're staying here, you can pretty much walk everywhere. You could stay in the neighborhood of Frederiksberg. This is where I live, and it's a pretty cool area and not very touristy at all. And it's still pretty close to the center, either by metro or bike, depending on exactly where you'd be staying. It could take around half an hour or more to walk to the center. Then you got the neighborhoods of Nørrebro and Vesterbro. They're like pretty young and hip areas with a lot of cafes, a lot of events going on, and also a lot less touristy compared to the center. You could also stay in Amager, and this way you would be close to the airport and also the beach, but you're still on the metro line, so you'll have easy access to the rest of Copenhagen. So there's really no best place to stay in Copenhagen, in my opinion. Either of the options I've mentioned would be perfectly fine, and it's very easy and fast to go between all the areas and to all the touristy things you would want to see. And what about when to visit? So the summer months are the most expensive, but they're also the best time to visit because of the weather. July and August are peak season here in Copenhagen, as well that's when most people have their vacation time. I think May or September would be the perfect time to visit Copenhagen to optimize for both the weather situation and the cost as well, as prices would be slightly lower. Now I travel quite a lot, and I prefer to travel away from Denmark when it's cold here, which is pretty much from October until May. It gets really cold, rainy, and well, just pretty dark as the sun rises late and sets very early. It's not that you can't have a great experience visiting in these colder months, but just be prepared for that, and that it will be a bit of a different experience compared to if you go in summer. As even though things like accommodation can be a bit cheaper in the winter months, you might end up spending more money on doing a lot of activities or eating, drinking coffee, as a lot of the free things to do in Copenhagen are outside, and if it's very cold and rainy, you probably don't want to be outside all day long. About transportation and getting around the city. So as I mentioned, the metro system and train system are all very great, and it's very easy to get around no matter where you're staying. And by using the site or app journeyplanner.dk, you can easily figure out how to get where you want to go. But if you want to do things a bit more like the locals do, you should try to rent a bike and go around like that. It's a great way to see the city too. But Copenhagen is also a very walkable city, so when you are in the center, you can pretty much walk around to all the cool spots, and just walking around and getting a bit lost around the city is probably my best tip for tourists coming here. If you are going to be staying a bit away from the city center and you know you'll be taking the metro quite a lot, you can look into getting a city pass, which gives you free transportation for 24 to 120 hours. So there's two passes, the small and the large. The small one basically includes the center of Copenhagen and most places you'll be visiting, and also until the airport. And the large one is basically if you want to go beyond that, so out to the suburbs and beyond. It does get a little bit expensive, but the quick math is if you are going to be doing something like 4 trips or more per day, then it can be worth looking into getting one of these passes and then save some money that way. Now, if you're going to be staying more than just a few days, you can look into getting one of these, a Reisekort. It essentially just makes every trip you take a little less expensive when you're using this card. And this is what a lot of us locals use here in Copenhagen. The card itself costs like $10 to make, and you can get it done at Copenhagen Central Station or even at some particular machines around each station. So perhaps look into this if you're going to be staying maybe a week or more. But again, if you're really going the budget route and trying to spend just as little as possible, the best option is just to walk everywhere. Stay somewhere quite central and walk. Other than the city pass and the Reisekort and the regular ticket, you could also look into getting a Copenhagen card, which we'll talk about now. Copenhagen card includes entrance to a lot of different attractions, activities, museums, and so on. And one version can also include free transportation as well. You can get access to places like Tivoli, a canal tour, and a whole bunch of different museums and castles, and even the zoo. But it can also get really expensive. I'll throw up the price card here, as it depends on how many days you want it, and I guess which version you want as well. But it boils down to this: if you are already planning to visit a lot of these attractions that are included in the card, it can really be worth it and could save you a lot of money to buy the Copenhagen card. But if you're only planning to visit a few, or you're not really sure yet, it might not be worth it. Now, I haven't done the exact math on this, as it will also depend on which of the places you would like to visit, as they all have different entrance fees, but you do need to go to quite a few places to make it worth it. I personally think that the biggest problem with this Copenhagen card, and well, similar cards that exist in many major cities, is, let's say you get the 48-hour pass. Then in these next 48 hours, you have to cram in as many of these attractions, museums, and just have to put them in back to back just to make the card actually worth it. So you need to check out what's included and what's not included and what you would like to do. For example, the card will give you a free entrance to Tivoli, but if you want to try the ride, you have to pay for that on top as well. And a Tivoli ride pass costs like $35 US. The website to take a look at all of this, I think, is just copenhagencard.com. And here you can check out all of the things and if it includes the things that you want to do or not. Again, if you're really on a budget, skip the Copenhagen card, walk a lot, and do a lot of the free activities, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Eating out in Copenhagen can get really expensive really fast. If you want to eat on a budget, cook yourself. Of course, this might not always be possible. Most budget hotels don't really come with a kitchen. But if you're staying in a hostel, there's usually going to be like a communal kitchen that you can use. So besides cooking yourself, here's what you can do to save a bit of money on food. Go to some supermarkets and buy their pre-made sandwiches, salads, or something similar. Places like 7-Eleven also has some small meals for okay prices. In Denmark, we really eat a lot of bread. So another thing you could do is buy a pack of good rugbrød, rye bread. Get some butter and some things to go on top, like cheese or salami. You could probably borrow a knife and maybe a plate in your hotel. And then just buy some fruit or other things you can eat on the go, and then you're all set. Now, of course, this way you won't be eating like a king and trying all the delicacies and the Michelin restaurants we have here in Copenhagen. But I mean, you're traveling on a budget. Personally, what I like to do when I travel to very expensive cities is to eat cheaply like this most days and then just treat myself maybe once or twice to have a great meal of some local food. The one thing I suggest that you don't miss in Copenhagen is smørrebrød. It's really just the rye bread with something on top, which I just talked about, but a fancy version from a restaurant, and it's just so good. And let's not forget the pastries. Go to any bakery and buy whatever looks good, or ask the person behind the counter what they suggest you try. Visiting a place like Tivoli can get so expensive. As I mentioned, just the ride pass you need to try the rides is going to cost $35. And even things like museums can have pretty steep entrance fees. But luckily there are plenty of free things you can do here in Copenhagen. But a lot of those happen outside, which again is why I recommend going in the warmer months, as it is just way more comfortable going around the city all day. But there's also just a lot more going on around the city in these months. During the cold months, people really like to just stay inside and chill. But if you want to know many of the cool places to visit and free things to do, you should watch my Copenhagen guide, which you can do by clicking right here. I'll be showing you a bunch of great things to do, mostly for free, and perhaps there's even a few hidden gems in there. So go check that out if you're planning a trip to Copenhagen.